Well, it's been an interesting year in South African politics, from Jacob Zuma's court battles to the DA implosion and the fall of former eThekwini Mayor Zandile Gumede, who will forget the contentious land issue, and the general elections in May. Our reporter Spamandla Goke joins us now from Durban to give us the latest and really recap of what's been happening throughout the year. Spa, one may say that it's been quite an interesting year, especially in the world of politics, but one such highlight includes former President Jacob Zuma and his legal battles.
Indeed, he's been in and out of courts. He has had so many applications that have been dismissed by the Pietermaritzburg High Court in KwaZulu-Natal. It was not surprising because his legal battle started many years ago, long before he became the President of the Republic. But of late, they came back to haunt him. If I'm not mistaken, I covered two of his applications that were dismissed by the court. His application for a permanent stay of prosecution for corruption charges related to the arms deal was dismissed. He is appealing that as we speak. He has taken that to the Supreme Court of Appeals in Bloemfontein. But yes, it's been a tough year for the former president. I think it's one of those years that he will sit and look back and say, yes, indeed, it's been a tough year. And also, his other application was dismissed by the Pietermaritzburg High Court. So he was also successfully sued, or should I say he was asked to apologize by the former Minister of Tourism, that's Derek Hanekom. The Durban High Court ruled that his tweet was very defamatory. He had to apologize for that, but he has not apologized. He has not deleted that tweet. So there have been many legal battles for the former president indeed.
I mean, from the former president, let's move on to the Democratic Alliance, which has seen quite an interesting year. One may say that an implosive year, especially with some of its leaders, including the DA leader Mmusi Maimane's resignation from the party.
I think that was to be expected. If I remember correctly, I covered Mmusi Maimane's last rally before the May elections. It was in Ngwamashu Township in Durban. I did ask him a question to say, are you worried about your future? Because before the elections, there were those rumblings within the DA when it comes to his leadership style. Some people were not happy with his leadership style, and also some people had said that his survival dependent on the performance of the DA at the polls, and when it didn't do well, or when it didn't do as much as was expected, he had to take that fall. And the return of Helen Zille made things worse for Mmusi Maimane. That implosion, which led to the resignation then of Herman Mashaba as the city of Johannesburg mayor. I mean, all of that was to be expected if you read what was transpiring behind the scenes when Helen Zille came back.
I mean, one may say that, of course, on one side, one is to be determined exactly what it means for 2020 where the Democratic Alliance is concerned. But another individual that was quite controversial for the year 2019 SPA is one such former eThekwini Mayor, Zandile Gumede. And, of course, on the one side is that implication of a 208 million rand Durban solid waste tender.
Indeed, and also if we were to remind our viewers that of late there are about 4 councillors from eThekwini that have been added to the list of the accused. Former eThekwini Mayor Zandile Gumede is due back in court on the 15th of January, if I'm not mistaken. But her legal and political troubles started really with that 208 million solid waste tender. It was alleged that she played a part in influencing the awarding of some contractors there, or some contracts rather. So it's called undue influence. But she will be back in court on the 15th of January. The ANC decided to remove her as the mayor of eThekwini, the only metro in KwaZulu-Natal, the only economic hub and powerhouse in the province. And also she was a powerful force in a sense that before being removed, she had been the chairperson of the ANC's biggest region in the country, eThekwini, with a membership of about 50,000 people. So she was very influential, a staunch Zuma supporter as well. We are told that she will be contesting the upcoming regional conference of the ANC in eThekwini. She remains a powerful force and player in the regional, provincial politics of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal.
Let's stay with the KwaZulu-Natal, because one such issue that continues to be a point of conversation is around land, as well as the Ingonyama Trust Act and also the beneficiaries thereof. And I remember I think it was in 2017 as well, where we saw the former President Kgalema Motlanthe actually calling for a complete scrap of the Trust Acts.
Indeed, it seems as if it's going to be a done deal. The Ingonyama Trust Act is going to go. I mean, there have been recommendations for it to be reviewed or to be repealed, and we do understand that the processes are ongoing. It's a thorny issue that saw the king of Amazulu basically throwing the line, saying he will fight till the end to defend his land. Ingonyama Trust administers about 2.8 million hectares of communal land. So basically the king is the sole trustee there. He has said that he will defend the land. He's been calling for another meeting with President Cyril Ramaphosa, who did meet with the king before and promised that they will deal with this issue in a very sensitive manner. But the king has been on a warpath, saying no one is going to touch the land of Amazulu. So basically the issue of Ingonyama Trust has been a very thorny issue. I think it's one of those biggest stories in 2019, and it's going to spill over to 2020, because up until there is a final decision on the issue of Ingonyama Trust Act, we are going to see those sporadic war talks from the king of Amazulu, who has said that he will do whatever it takes to protect his land. This is part of the land reform process in the country. Some people were saying KwaZulu-Natal is the only unique case where one person has got control over the land. The entire land needs to be transferred back to the ownership of the state.
I mean, let's talk a little bit before we go into the country's elections, in terms of, I hear what the king is saying, we hear what government is saying, but what are the people saying? Do they trust the king with actually not having control and ownership of the land, but rather the king having complete total control of those millions of hectares?
I think it depends who you speak to in KwaZulu-Natal. Let's remember that the king is a powerful force. If you go to deep rural areas, you've got people who say they support the king. The Ingonyama Trust Act should not be repealed or scrapped. They want the king to continue to have control of the land on their behalf. But if you go to the townships and other areas, you have people who say, why should this be a unique case? Why should someone be treated in a special way? Let there be processes that are unique all over the country. There should be no special case for KwaZulu-Natal, and the king should not hold the land. So it depends who you speak to in KwaZulu-Natal, but you've got different views.
Let's talk a little bit about this year's elections. You know, I was speaking to political analysts, Ivor Sorokinski, a little bit earlier on about the turnout of the political landscape in South Africa. And one would say that perhaps the individuals that really won when it came to the elections this year was the economic freedom fighters were gaining momentum of support.
Indeed, I think it was the most watched election. Obviously, all elections are important in the country since 1994. But our viewers might have forgotten that we had an election in May. Things have moved so quickly in the political arena that you may have forgotten that indeed we had an election in May. I think the EFF did very well, not only nationally, but in KwaZulu-Natal as well. I've covered most of their rallies, even when their president was here, Julius Malema. He did say that they wanted to make inroads, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. They increased their seats and their supports at the provincial legislature. But also for me, I think the untold story of the May election was the fact that you had so many people in South Africa who were eligible to vote, who decided not to register to vote. If I'm not mistaken, about 9 million South Africans were eligible to vote. They decided not to register. But also that turnout, if I'm not mistaken, about 7% decline. That was huge. Some people may downplay that, but also it talks to the issue of ordinary South Africans and their trust in terms of politicians and political parties. Many people wanted to see how the governing party was going to fare in this election, bearing in mind that Cyril Ramaphosa had just emerged as the president of the ANC. In Nasrec, they had recalled former President Jacob Zuma. Many people were expecting the ANC to drop. It did drop, but also some people wanted to see how the Democratic Alliance was going to perform. So all those political dynamics were at play during this election. But for me, the biggest talking point was the issue of people deciding not to register to vote and not going out to vote.
Spa, we're going to leave it there for this morning. Spamandla Koke giving us the latest in terms of our political climate and perhaps also what we can determine for the year 2020.